Anything else? We ready to get started? Okay. So thank you for joining us again for Act 3. Welcome back to Sue. My apologies for our confusion last week, but I did send an email with Sue's thoughts about Act 2, which were very beautiful and helpful. So you can take a look at that if you missed it. And there's one quick point I wanted to make, because at some point in our discussion last week, I paused about to say something and then lost my train of thought, which happens more often than I'd like. So I want to catch that train right now before I forget again, which is in Act 2, I became so conscious of the commitment to romanticism necessary to create a play like this. So just the idea of these rhapsodic speeches coming out of the mouth of a rooster, the commitment to a romantic sense of life that's necessary to pull that off. And I gather that that was one of the difficulties in producing it on stage, is that the actors would have to possess that same sort of commitment. And someone, I think it was, someone shared, Paul, was it you, shared the link to to a production off Broadway, and there was a little video clip of the actors playing the parts, and it felt to me, watching the video clips, like they were mocking their own lines. I don't think that that was their intention, but it takes such commitment, heartfelt commitment to those lines, that I think it would be difficult. Sue, was there anything you wanted to share about that?
No, I agree with you that really this was one of the difficulties with the first production, that the chief actor playing Chantecler simply didn't share these feelings. Very sad. If only Coquelin had survived, everything would have been very different.
Yes. Yeah. I love the story you shared, that Coquelin, at least he initially was skeptical too, because it's understandable that having, rhapsodic romantic farm animals sounds like a contradiction. But then after Coquelin read the script, he was completely enamored.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I love just the idea of there's that image of the overturned pot. And in your notes, you were talking about how Rostand is basically saying to us, we have ways of showing you, making you glimpse, at least for a moment, what it is to have a romantic view of life. So we are all those pot dwellers sometimes, I think, and he's overturning the pot while we sit in that theater. And so I just envisioned, with a real commitment, what it would be like to hear these lines spoken with earnestness and beauty and that true sense of romanticism. And the fact of it seeming on the surface inconsistent with the characters who are uttering these lines just makes it all the more powerful, I think.
I agree. Yeah.
Yes. And I just wanted to make a quick personal connection, and then we'll get to Act 3. I was in correspondence with a friend, Alan Charles Kors. I think some of you know who he is. He's an intellectual historian and one of my heroes. And casually in the course of this correspondence, he told me about a musical trio who played in his home, and just what a treasure and a great opportunity this was. And he just said casually in this email, life never ceases to be astonishingly interesting. And I just thought that is the sort of phrase that rolls off of his tongue or out of his fingers. And it's both the capacity to look at the world and express your feelings in a poetic form, but also the courage to do that. It takes courage to do that. And that's what I feel like sitting in the audience for Chantecler, I would be having modeled in exquisite form before me, is the courage to be a romantic. And actually courage comes up in this act, doesn't it?
Certainly.
Discussion of her. Okay, so let's begin. Is there anything you want to say, Sue, before I dive in with the guinea hen and her?
No, let's dive in.
Okay. So the guinea hen, I have this little book by Liberma is the last name, and it's a guide to Chantecler, and there are a number of really fascinating insights there. So I just wanted to share a few descriptions of the guinea hen that from that book. He describes her as the busybody, the rattle-brained parvenu, snobbish to a degree. And he describes her salons as where the beautiful parlors, the marvelous collections of bric-a-brac, the palm leaves and the hidden orchestra, the invited guests and the ushers serve but as a means for vulgar display of self. I thought that was a fantastic description. And the vulgar ostentation of what money can do and buy. So she's just trying to buy sophistication and esteem. Thoughts about the guinea hen, Sue?
I don't think she's actually used any money in this case. I think she's made her salon so interesting in this awful society that people feel they have to be there, you know, otherwise they won't count.
Oh, sure.
No, I don't think she could have spent any money. I mean, that's one of the jokes about where she says, I've got the choir. I mean, the bees would be there anyway.
Yeah. Or the breeze.
And the breeze as well. Everything would be there anyway.
Yes, that's true. So maybe just she is the sort of person who has the salon set up that eventually she can establish a reputation for herself as the place you have to be. But it's true. It's just about, there's sort of a social capital she gets in having anyone who's important, getting that sense that anyone who's important comes to her salons. I know a lot of people here in this group have read The Fountainhead, so I cannot let this pass without making the connection to Kiki Holcomb. She collects architects, right? So the character in The Fountainhead, Sue, is just this woman who anyone who's anyone in architecture, she hosts them at her parties, but she herself knows nothing about the art.
I have read that. I have read that.
Okay. Okay.
I couldn't quite finish it, I'm afraid.
Okay.
I couldn't cope with it.
I don't know if you remember that character. But
I do remember her, yes.
Busybody salon host. There were a number of lines. Okay, I'm sorry. I have to say one thing. I mentioned this in the Facebook group, but I don't know how many of you see that. The Gertrude Hall, I remembered that the third act is where I think her translation falls apart a bit. So I read the third act in her version and I struggled with it. And then I went to K. Nolte Smith and read it again. And partly maybe it was reading it a second time, but really I think K. Nolte Smith's translation, that is almost impossible to get, I'm sorry to say, is infinitely superior, much better. So a lot of the things I'm going to refer to today are from the K. Nolte Smith translation. Okay, so a couple of lines that capture the soul of the guinea hen that I loved. She says at the start, "What a crush when the whole crowd is there. So many came," and she's so delighted that everybody who's is come to her. And then she turns to one of the hens and says, "Just one of my little affairs." Yes. That's such a good archetype. You know, we just know that type where she's so dazzled at being the center of attention and then tries to brush it off as something insignificant.
Can I say a word about the language?
Yes.
Because I do think any non-French speaker and even modern French speakers would struggle with this. There's so many invented words, so much play on words, it's almost impossible. And the other thing is that, of course, Rostand is directly criticizing all the salons in Paris at this time. I mean, he never went to a salon if he could possibly help it. His wife did, and his son did, but he really couldn't stand them. And I'm afraid the audience now felt directly targeted. This was one of the problems with the reception of the play. Later on, once salons were not important, say in the 1950s or so on later, everyone enjoyed the play. But this is such a direct criticism of a lot of people who are in the audience. They must have got more and more uncomfortable.
Because the type who would be there to attend this play would be the type who are there in attendance at these salons.
It would be le tout Paris, if you want to call them that. Yes, everyone who thought they were anybody would have to be there. Yes. Little did they know.
Looks like we have a question or a comment.
Oh, just apropos of what Sue was just saying, I just wanted to also mention in terms of attack, not only by reference to the salon, but there are stage instructions that were very concerning to me. That Chantecler, when the pheasant hand is saying "let's go," he goes towards the back of the stage, and then when he has this vituperative kind of attack, it says go to the front of the stage. So Chantecler would be talking to the audience, saying this, that, and the other, and then the pheasant hand is saying let's go, and they are going to the back of the stage. Yes. Maybe not the best judgment on his part.
Very confrontational, but he has courage. I also, this Liberma's phrase of this is all just a vulgar display of self. The guinea hen clearly wants it to be all about her. As they come in, she says, I have the bees, I have the peacock, I have them all. So it's always I have, like they are her pets, or she can claim their alleged virtues in some way. But then that becomes, there's so much humor in this. So he directly mocks this by saying, I have the breeze. You can't invite her. She just comes, but she's still going to claim credit for having the breeze there. And then I also enjoyed the character of her son, who I suspect is right in line to be every bit as pretentious as she is. He's hip to the latest lingo and everything, but he sees her as she's not as hip. She's kind of falling behind the times a little bit, and she's kind of an embarrassment. Is that?
I think he finds her more embarrassing as the act goes on. Yeah.
But maybe not embarrassing for the same reasons that we do. She is making a fool of herself, but it's almost like he's got the youthful, because he corrects her pronunciation. Yeah.
And he gets very worried as she certainly loses her head when all the exotic cockerels come in. And I might mention that the exotic cockerels were a real fad at the time, a real fad. And funnily enough, the man who was playing Chantecler, Lucien Guitry, he had a big collection himself.
So you could understand why he might not be as committed to the lines if he's making fun of himself in the course of uttering them. Raj, did you have something else to?
I was going to say what one of you already said, which is that he corrects the pronunciation, which I identified with me because my kids always correct my pronunciation. So the cicadas, you have to pronounce the C, the T aside, cicadas. Yes. Yeah, my kids do that.
So the first guest that is featured at this salon is the peacock, and he is, I think, the pompous, pretentious, pedantic kind of character. He wants to, I think this was Liberma's phrase, that he wants to, he desires to dazzle by a display of his learning. And in the K. Nolte Smith translation, there's a point at which he's called, I think by the guinea hen, the prince of the unexpected adjective.
Yes.
But what makes it unexpected often is that it is nonsensical. It doesn't even make sense under the circumstances. It's just a multisyllabic, pretentious sort of sounding word. And probably there's supposed to be something intellectual in the fact of it not quite making sense. That seems to be a literary trend, that if we throw something in that's not quite sensible, that makes it deep.
I think it's all making fun of him, really, isn't it? He doesn't really know. He just throws these words out. And he's very, did you notice that he's a little bit peeved when he hears that Chantecler is coming? Not very happy about that at all.
He would be threatened. I mean, that's what I love at the end of the act, that I guess, like the nose speech in Cyrano, Chantecler just takes the stage and shows that he can do everything that they attempt to do better.
You can understand he's a bit peeved. He wanted to be the center of attention.
Mm-hmm. But so he throws out these, I think my favorite was the guinea hen says his thoughts are so, and he says hebdomadal, which I had to look up, not a word I was familiar with, which means weekly.
Yes, he hasn't a clue, really.
Doesn't have any idea what he's saying.
He just throws these words out. Nice long word, yeah.
And then the guinea hen eats it all up because she is absolutely delighted that he calls her son plausible. Yes. What could be more flattering than that?
It is hilarious.
And a couple of my favorite moments in regard to the peacock, the feeling that I got was that I wanted to be in attendance at one of these salons in the company of either Chantecler or Patou. So all of us have been in a social situation that might not be as essentialized as this one, but where we feel like we're surrounded by people. I was just at an event in Los Angeles a few weeks ago where I felt very much like this, that it had to do with everybody, everyone was somebody, and that's what made you significant in this crowd. And there was just sort of a phoniness in the nature of the conversation. So I would have loved to have Patou there. Oh, hold on. I just have to read a couple of quick lines to say when the peacock says, serve as Petronius Piest and Maecenas Messiah, volatile volatizer of words, and that a jeweled judge I love from my prismatic perch to represent that taste of which I am. So he's being self-aggrandizing and using all of his sophisticated language. And Patou simply says, my head aches. So I'd love to have him quietly whispering in my ear that it makes his head ache. Or later Chantecler says he does this, pyrotechnics with words again, and Chantecler just says, God in heaven. That's it.
And then he has to go and look out across a normal field and see that nature is still there.
Yes.
Yeah. Especially once these extraordinary cockerels have come in, he has to reassure himself, maybe you should have looked out of the window. That would have helped.
Yes, exactly. That's actually a great thought. Look out the window. And I think in the K. Nolte Smith, again, I don't remember how Gertrude Hall translates it, but he says he's delighted to see that the calf has only one head after seeing the parade of cockerels. So I think I'm interested to hear how those who read the Gertrude Hall experienced this, but it was the parade of the cockerels where I got lost with the Gertrude Hall. The humor was lost. The point was lost. It just felt like a long stream of words of these characters being introduced, whereas maybe I could share just this excerpt from it in the Facebook group or something. In the Gertrude Hall translation, or certainly in the original French, the humor, the absurdity, the arbitrariness of the claim to distinction of each of these cockerels, and then the wordplay that's happening at the same time is very clear. It's not clear in the Gertrude Hall, so I apologize for to those of you who kind of missed the fun of that scene. But the cockerels are like, they're man-made as opposed to natural, which I take to mean really metaphorically contrived and phony as opposed to authentic and real and earnest, which is what Chantecler is. And also that literary trend of being avant-garde for the sake of it, just kind of something at odds with the natural, making you eccentric and interesting, and allegedly in some way.
Yes, and it's because they are exotic. I mean, the Bantad gets very excited when one of them's from Belgium, for instance. Anything that isn't French has become fashionable. And Rostand is saying throughout the play, look, aren't you lucky to be French? Aren't we lucky to be French? French is a wonderful country. You know, we can be proud of being French. We don't need to be imitating other countries. We are French, you know? And the French countryside is so beautiful. Why spoil it? You know, there's always this
proud of being the Gallic cock.
Yes,
You won't claim that title, but yes, I suppose that is what it means. And then proud of being authentic, simple in the sense of authentic. It's not real simple. It's not actually simple in his mind any more than that rake at the beginning in Act 1 was simple. It's beautiful looked at in the right way, but to be the cock that's the children's toy or on the weather vane, there's a pride in simply being that. So yeah, the parade of the artificial cockerels is absolutely hysterical because it combines this mockery of these arbitrary claims to distinction, being foreign, being exotic, with the guinea hen's giddy delight at being the one to host all these arbitrarily distinguished guests, and the peacock's pretentiousness, throwing in adjectives to describe them, and the blackbird's sneering mockery from the side. All of those things are happening at once as they're being introduced. So some of the humor that I got from the K. Nolte Smith that was lost on me with the Gertrude Hall, you know, as they're being introduced, it says, for example, he had this one with a double comb, and the guinea hen says, it's double, as if that matters, but just that fact, it's not single, it's double. There's no more significance to it than that. Or the golden penciled Hamburg cock, and she says, he's golden penciled, he's a Hamburg. Neither of those things means anything to her. And then at one point, the blackbird mocks one of them and says, with several bridges. I don't remember what the context for his joke was, but he says, with several bridges, and she says, several bridges, again, just repeating mindlessly. And even I think it's the peacock now who says, now she's just an echo. She's not even actually processing what's being said. She's just echoing back these claims to distinction.
She's lost her head completely, and she doesn't know how to respond to all this. Yeah. And so she just repeats everything, which is funny.
And it's especially funny when we get to the bare-necked cock, and she says, bare naked?
Oh, yes.
As willing to accept that as any of the others is the impression we have. But then she's corrected, bare-necked. And then the rumpless cock, the line in K. Nolte Smith is, he has no rear. It's the crowning of my whole career.
Yes, that's very good.
So I will try to share just that section. I think that will be consistent with copyright laws. Anyone can correct me if it's not, but just so you can get a flavor of how funny that scene is and how well it showcases the follies and vices of each of the characters involved. Any comments or thoughts about that parade of the artificial cockerels before I move on to Chantecler?
Well, we could also say it's prolonging the tension, because we know Chantecler is going to come. And it's like Act 1 in Cyrano de Bergerac, where you know the hero is coming, it's all very well prepared, and you have to wait and you have to wait. And eventually along comes Chantecler after all these false cockerels, really. And is so simple and natural and just himself. And not really welcomed at all. Oh, there's nothing wrong with you. You know, you're just so simple. Yeah.
And his introduction is so fantastic, because the fact of having someone to announce the names just really adds to the pretentiousness of it all. And it sets up the scene very well, but it's so pretentious. And then to have him walk up and say simply the cock. That's it. He needs no distinction beyond that. That is my pride. Raj?
Yeah, just one more thing that Chantecler says. No, sorry, the Blackbird says regarding the tailless cock in the Gertrude Hull translation. So yes, as you said, the guinea hen is like, oh, he has nothing, whatever behind, charmed, no tail. And the Blackbird says, I like his cheek.
Oh, this would be full of puns in the original, and some of them get translated, but some of them I think they just can't find a way to capture it. Ian.
Sue, I wondered if I might ask you a question. You said that this salon would have been quite confrontational to the Parisian audience. Yes. I wondered, do you think there were direct references to particular individuals? For example, they introduced the blue cock of Andalusia, and that sounded like Picasso to me. And I'm not educated enough to know whether or not there were other direct references to people who attended the salons of that time.
I think Rostand very carefully avoided doing this at all. But he did actually lose a friend who imagined he was being portrayed as the peacock, and a man about town who was very similar, in fact, to Rostand's peacock here. But Rostand always claimed he did not have anybody in mind at all about this. He always claimed these were all from his imaginations. If people chose to identify with them, that's another matter, it's up to them, but he wasn't going to, no. They were purely from his imagination. That's a lovely idea about Picasso, though. I hadn't thought of that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, obviously they were drawn directly from his experience, so he could only go so far to protect the
Yeah, he had a collection himself simply to observe them, and yes, but he also had a farmyard of natural animals.
Okay, so we have this salon of the fashionable set. They're pedants, they're cynics, they're snobbish, they're phony. And then in comes Chantecler, who is earnest, authentic. I love the image of before, I think someone says, is he here? And the comment is that he's scratching up the soil, which is what he does before he crows too. And you just have this sense of this grounded character at one with the earth around him. He makes his entrance. Let's see, there were some lines at his entrance that I wanted to reflect on. Announce me, please, as just the cock. And then he says, for a suit, I've only, excuse my being so sober, the green of April and gold of October. I'm ashamed. I'm the cock, just the cock. The one still finds, that one still finds sometimes in an old farmyard, a rooster shaped like a rooster, one whose form remains on steeple vanes in an artist's eye, in a toy a child's hand pulls from a candy box. So that's the Kane Ulty Smith translation, but just genuine. He is genuine and genuine, French, and connected to nature. let's see. So a few other, well, I'll just go in order of some notes that I have here, but anyone can interrupt with comments or questions. This metaphor of the scarecrow. So I want to make sure I understood it completely, but I think I do, and if I do, I loved this image. But so they're all parading around as the fashionable set, and he points to a scarecrow in the field with its clothes. You know, you dress the scarecrow in clothing, look human, and he says that clothing flapping in the breeze is saying, I was once the fashion. So the image of the scarecrow is capturing the kind of the fleeting nature of fads, and that all these people claiming distinctions will once just be standing in a field scaring away the crows instead.
The big thing about the peacock is that he is the height of fashion. Mm-hmm. And so this is a dig at him as well. So, you know, that he will be out of fashion. You know, fashion naturally changes. That's the whole point of fashion. It comes in and out of fashion. It doesn't last at all. Yeah. And I love the image there with the wind blowing the garments as if the scarecrow is really alive. And then the wind drops and they flop again, and then it comes back and livens them up again. It's absolutely brilliant. Yes.
And then he, by contrast, so one of the phrases in the K. Smith translation is he calls that parade of cocks the chickens of the absurd. And then he describes his own nature by contrast. Well, he describes them and then himself. I think they were made by men with tortuous minds who called it a feat of the intellect to make a chicken of the absurd, taking a wing from here and a waddle from there. I think there's nothing left in those cocks of a rooster. They're all thrown together potluck, made to guard a jar of cookies, not a barnyard. And when I hear that description, I just think of a lot of avant-garde writing, which feels to me very much like this, that the intention is the sophistication comes of a kind of nonsensical throwing together of thoughts, as opposed to having a clear and integrated purpose to the writing. And he says of himself, by contrast, I say, and the sun will say I'm right, that a rooster's only duty is to be a crimson cry. And how do we describe for the poet metaphorically what that means to be a crimson cry? But for Rostand, I suppose it's to call attention to beauty and the ideal, and that's the artist's true purpose in his mind.
Rostand feels it's the duty of every poet to call attention to beauty and what is natural and lovely. Yes.
Okay. So you mentioned the challenges of translation, and I think the scene that I feel most strongly I'm completely missing out on the thrill of without being able to read the French is his, what I think of as a freestyle rap on all the cockerels, where he uses, gosh, it's K. Smith does her best to capture it, but it's the sheer, he's combining mockery, mockery that the Blackbird could never dream of achieving. It's the height of true mockery, with wordplay that the peacock could never pretend to achieve, and this kind of fast-paced cadence of language that's just brilliant in wit and poetry. So we who are reading it in English, I'm sure, only get the slightest taste of it.
And the alliteration, I don't know how you would replace that in English. He's invented quite a lot of these words, they're not all real words at all, but he's had great fun here. And it must sound lovely on stage pouring out, yeah.
And there's okay, so in K. Smith, this is just a taste of it. You cocks who take uncockly shapes, you cockatrices, shuttlecocks, and mockeries of cocks, all curled and coiffed with cocoa palms. My anger makes me talk like the peacock. I alliterate, you cockeyed cockatoos, you pop. Okay, so that gives you the sense of what it would feel like to hear him make this speech. My daughter just wanted to. She's just discovered Hamilton, and there are a few scenes in Hamilton that feel a little bit like this to me, where there's wordplay and it's very fast moving, and there are witticisms included that pass by very quickly, and you almost have to go back and listen to it again to hear it. So I feel like I get a taste of that from Hamilton, but I think Rostand probably can't be matched here. So let's see. Okay, and then there's this moment where the cockerel's crow is analyzed by the crowd, and later that analysis comes back to almost torture him and for a moment make it difficult for him to crow because they've put all these ideas in his head. But this is that inauthenticity in art again, that you're looking at it in terms of school or syllabification or dynamics.
In the original, it's just three chickens who are interviewing, and they keep popping up and down, and it must be so disoriented. And the idea is partly a dig again at his own times with the different schools of poetry, the idealists and the symbolists and the realists and so on and so forth. And I think as well, Rostand is feeling very personal here because he must have been interviewed so often and found it so tedious. And there are some things you simply can't explain. He can't explain how he writes his plays. And he said, I write them as an apple tree gives apples. It's just what's in him comes out.
Yes.
And of course, this has a terrible result, this awful so-called interview, because after a bit, he's so confused, he simply can't remember how to crow. Yeah.
So it's poking fun at the idea of elevating these elements of literature over the goal of art itself. This is something I personally connect with as a literature teacher, because so much of my schooling, and I think of many people's schooling in literature, you spend all your time learning about the historical context for the work, or analyzing what narrative voice it's written from, or looking for literary devices within it, at the expense of ever understanding what this artist from his soul was trying to convey to us. So I relate to it in that sense. But for the artist producing it, which is something I haven't done, if it's earnest, it must feel like it's coming just from this very deep place inside of you, and you're expressing it in the most authentic form you can, not thinking as you produce your work of art what school you should be ascribed to.
Yes, and I think it applies in even more practical ways as well. So when somebody's trying to learn golf strokes, for instance, they can get so confused, they just don't know what to do, or what instinctively you hit the ball with your stick, but the instinct is being overridden here, isn't it? And it is very confusing, and you lose track of what's real, really, and what is instinctive.
Okay, so that your comment about the apple, so in our translation it was a rose, is it not? Is it not a rose?
Well, it is a rose. Sorry, I was remembering actually an interview that Rostand gave. When he was being asked this kind of thing, and he said, "I give my poetry as an apple tree gives apples." Yes, sorry.
Okay. Well, no, I'm glad you made that mistake, because it shows how much Chantecler represents Rostand himself.
Oh,
Because basically said the same
Yes.
thing.
That was worked out well, yeah.
Yes. And again, I think this is lost in translation and completely lost in the Gertrude Hall translation. I'm not sure I entirely get it myself, so you'll have to tell us what happens. But he says, this is what provokes the fight. He says, I give my song as a rose bush gives its rose. And the pretentious peacock says, oh, I knew that a reference to the rose would come around. And it's like, that's conventional. That's,
Is it almost, yes, accepted sign of beauty and nature, that sort of thing. A rose, is perfection, really.
Right.
Yes.
So they're just scornful of that as the metaphor. And then the peacock says something sarcastic about declension of the verb that sounds like rose. And then I gather in the next scene, Chantecler both makes a passionate defense of, including an attack on a flower attacks the sun. They have identical foes. So he defends his image of the rose and this commitment to authentic beauty, while building in the thing that the peacock is accusing him of being unable to do, or something like that.
The peacock assumes that he doesn't know any Latin. Well, Chantecler seems to know everything.
Yes.
So he is able to decline Latin, rosa, 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 etc. And he does it in the poetry. And all the time he's waiting for the patte blanche, the pile blanche to come along. He's just, so there are lots of reasons for this. I mean, he's defending beauty, he's defending the rose, he's defending romanticism, if you like. And all the time he's just waiting for this challenge to come. Yes. And of course it does. Yes.
Well, it reminds me so much of the ballad in rhyme from Cyrano, because he is accused of being a poet, and he says, a poet, you say, okay, I'll compose a ballade while I fight you. So this is Chantecler's equivalent of composing a ballade while fighting. Okay, I'll decline the verb.
Yes.
While defending the rose, while preparing to fight. Really,
there's so many echoes of Cyrano in this play.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, both have to be the soul of Rostand. So, okay. So he fights the white pile. Now, there's a couple of interesting things in that scene that I wanted to ask about. First, I wanted to note the line where he says he's never killed a thing. And it reminded me of the line, I extinguish nothing. There's nothing within him that desires to kill, to extinguish, to bring down. He only wants to elevate and illuminate.
And he wants to protect, doesn't he? To protect the helpless, really, and those who need help. Yeah, sorry.
So I guess I think one of the most emotional moments in this play, probably, I was going to say for me, but it has to be in the play, is the betrayal of the crowd. And I think the betrayal of the crowd hurts so much because Chantecler didn't expect it. He didn't, there's that line, it says that he looks so sad. Oh, what do I have the line here? He says something like, I've always been so good to them, but that's not the line. I don't know if anybody is able to.
Yes, quite early, I think, earlier in the scene, he says, why should they hate me? I'm a loved character. I do my duty to everyone. I look after everyone, and I am loved. And I can't remember whether it's the blackbird or the pheasants, and says, of course, they've overheard the jealous creatures plotting his demise, and they say, no, I'm afraid you're mistaken. And then he finds out in the worst possible way. Right. Yes.
So it's the blackbirds. Okay, so it says a big circle forms. In the second row are the exotic cocks. In front of them, avid, all the barnyard hens, the ones who are all in love with him, chicks and ducks. And then Patou says to Chantecler, go in, the public wants to see your guts. And Chantecler says, sadly, there's just that one little word in this translation, sadly, I always treated them well.
Yes, yes. That's right. In the French, it's je n'ai fait que du bien.
I've only done good for them. But he's surrounded by a hate-filled circle. So the tide turns, their loyalty turns just like that, just in a moment.
Was there ever any loyalty, I wonder? If right in Act 1, the chickens don't think of him as important. And when the pigeon wants to hear him sing, they hardly take any notice of him until he says, what a beautiful chicken you are. And then she pays attention. He is undervalued. We see that. And then we see the jealousy. Yes, but he doesn't realize because he's always done his duty.
Right. He's been focused on that, not so much on their attention. So this scene was, I had asked, I think last time, why he has to guard his secret. And in the context of the play and this being a rooster, he's guarding his secret because they won't believe him that he actually makes the sun rise. I mean, that's the literal reason for protecting it, but trying to understand what it is, what Rostand is feeling here about what is the secret exactly, and why he has to protect it. And I feel like this scene helped me to understand that. Because, so I just described at the beginning in our conversation, the vulnerability in expressing true passion and commitment and an idealistic, because it makes you vulnerable to mockery or so many other things. So there's a vulnerability in that. And the romantic artist has to do that. It takes such a bearing of their soul to be able to, and a belief, a self-belief that is, we see in Chantecler and as you've said, was in Rostand. It's a self-belief that's almost fleeting in a way because it's so hard to hold on to that idealistic vision and to create something so beautiful to
yes, but there's nothing egotistical about it. I do feel with Ayn Rand's heroes and heroines, they are terrible egoists. Rostand and Chantecler and Cyrano, they are not egoists. They are not, why have I been chosen for this role? They're modest. They didn't ask to be a great poet or a great Chantecler or a great Cockerell or whatever. They are modest. They're almost in awe of this gift they've been given, that this role that they have to play. It is something beyond their control. And they keep it quiet because they feel so modest about it. But now, I mean, just like Cyrano, after he's learned that Roxane doesn't love him, here is Chantecler finding the crowd doesn't love him and whipping it up, in fact, against him by saying his secret, which everyone thinks is ludicrous. It's a bit like the Cyrano non merci speech, I'm happier if everyone's against me. He only says that because Roxane doesn't love him. And it's the same thing here. So he said, all right, if you're going to be against me, I'll give you a good reason, and then I will die with my head held high and my self-respect intact. You can boo me, you can shout insults as much as you like, it will only make me stronger. So that's his attitude.
So the issue of, how this relates to the characters in Ayn Rand's novels is an enormously complex one. So I don't think we'll be able to really, no, that's fine. I think it's an interesting topic to raise. I think one of the things that many people feel about the Fountainhead is that it kind of challenges an understanding of what these terms mean. And so it's even difficult to discuss the issue because what it means to be an egotist has one kind of conventional cultural meaning, and then a different one that she's trying to portray in the novels. But I only raise that because is, I agree totally that Chantecler is not arrogant or egotistical in the sense of the guinea hen, where it's something about looking to a sense of identity from the appreciation of the crowd, or feeling a sense of superiority over the rest of them. There's nothing in him, but there's something, what I started to feel here is that there's something, and it's elusive to me because I'm not an artist, but I feel like I see this in the, I guess anybody can relate to it in the sense that we're creating something. When you're creating it, then the act of creation requires a sort of sense of self-belief that might be at odds with the reality of what you're going to produce. But you can't produce something with the idea that you're not capable of producing it. It has to be this very, in the moment of creation, or just abstractly in the act of creation, there's a sense of self-belief that's necessary. And I think I've mentioned that I call this play to mind a lot personally. And this is a bit of a vulnerable confession to make, but there are often times that I'm producing content for Read With Me and I think, I don't even know if this is good. It happens a lot. It's just like, I'm desperate to share my thoughts about something. I'm so earnestly eager to communicate what is, a little bit elusive, or, it's hard to grasp. And there are times that I can let that undermine my capability of doing it. And when I feel that, I do think of Chantecler. I think of the character, just do the thing that you feel you're meant to do it to the best of your ability, and believe in yourself as long as you're in the process of doing it, and then come what may.
It is, and Raj had a good point there about, he is proud, he has self-belief, but he's not proud in the wrong sort of abilities. He's proud that he has this role he's been given. That's what he's proud of, and he believes in his role and he has to do this. Yes, it's self-belief, certainly. Yes, absolutely.
And you get the sense that, to maintain that self-belief, you almost have to, in the moment, separate yourself from the world around you. So that's what I had the sense that in that moment, he told his secret. And what was the consequence of telling his secret? Open mockery. So go ahead. No, please.
That's why he told it. It will make him stronger.
Right. In that moment,
strength to feel they're all against him, but he knows he is right.
So in that moment, but I also had the sense that was the vulnerability. He must have had a sense of that vulnerability before, when he didn't want to tell his secret. Because remember, there's that line where he says, don't let the blackbird come near me right now. I just made my cry. I'm so vulnerable to his mockery right now. So he always had the sense that if he tells his secret, it's going to make him vulnerable somehow. And then in this moment, when he sees their betrayal and faces the reality of their mockery, then he decides, okay, I'm just going to open myself to it and face it all, and use that for strength instead of shying away from it or being afraid of it. So I could conceive, of the artist or any creator being in a situation like that too, where you might, in one sense, try to make yourself immune from the mockery, or try to, not look at Twitter, or you might also face it openly and use it as fuel. That this is
the point is, he is actually about to die. He feels he is about to die, and that changes everything. I want to die beneath laughter. I want to die being mocked. So it's again, a kind of pride. But with the blackbird, I mean, the blackbird is such an insignificant you can feel Chantecler didn't want the blackbird, because the blackbird represents all the things that Chantecler is not. But now, if he's going to die, he's going to show them this is what he believes.
Okay, so then it's Cyrano, not here, not lying down, no one help me.
Yeah.
I'm going to die on my own terms, and the mockery.
On my own terms, that's exactly it. Yes. Okay. And he wants to keep his self-respect. So he's clinging to what he knows, he believes what he believes. Yes, yes.
So that in that case, their mockery only their mockery only lets him feel his commitment to his own values more.
Yes, yes, and helps him to bear it. Yes.
That's very helpful. Stefan?
So I just wanted to discuss the difference between being a cock and being a human being, and the two natures, because on one sense, he's fulfilling his nature as the being that he is, but on the other hand, he's kind of personified. So we kind of think of him as a human. So that's where the conflict comes in, because he seems to have rationality, which would overcome maybe being that role that you're born to be, but he's also a cock, so he has a nature as well. So it's kind of hard as a human to read it and figure out what his true nature is, because they're mixing a human nature with an animal nature. I just found that maybe that's a conflict there.
Let me try to get a sense of, I mean, I think what you're getting at connects with the question I raised last time of should we consider him deluded or not? And I think what you're saying is, well, he is a cock. His job is to crow, and they may think that they, make the sunrise or whatever. But I do think everything holds up as a metaphor for Rostand and for human life. So I wouldn't want to think of it as at odds with that, because I really do think he's just using this character to capture his own circumstances. I know Sue agrees. So Sue,
well, he's also protecting, he's doing his job. What I mean? So it's not just in a negative way. I don't mean that only in a negative way. I mean, he's fulfilling his role as the kind of animal he is, but he's also a rational being too, which a cock isn't. So it's just an interesting mix.
He's certainly representing what Rostand feels. And I know Rostand felt his enemies, and perhaps most of the audience at this stage were not in sympathy with him at all as a poet. Yes, yes. And the comment that's just been put up about Patu saying, will you stop behaving like human beings, as the crowd gets excited and bloodthirsty. That, of course, is a reference to bullfighting, which Rostand did actually force himself to attend one to get the feeling of it. And it's also a dig at human beings and how bad we are at this sort of thing. Yes.
John?
I don't know if I can say this. I'm going to try a few words. I'm reminded of Keats' great ode, truth is beauty, beauty is truth. And I've not heard anyone use the word truth. In the first two acts, there is no life-death situation. So I'm having a hard time, and this whole discussion is helping me a lot, resolve how Chantecler can be so insightful to the exact character of these individuals that have no self, and be able to attack them so well, because he's the one with the linguistic gift. And in the first two chapters, he protects his secret. It's only when, that's because he's in a state of survival. Death has not materialized. Ukraine has not happened yet. In the third act, it gets much more serious.
Mhm.
And Sue said it so well before. I was trying to understand this, the motivation. He says the truth. He gives his secret away because he's on the point of dying.
Mhm.
And my point is, you can talk about romanticism. I'm not comfortable with that because to me, that's too idealistic. To me, Chantecler is more, he has shown Rostand, the two. They've seen so deeply into life that they see the beauty. They have self.
Mhm.
They have what Carl Gustav Jung calls individuation. They've realized a coherent self that none of the other characters really have, at least not to the degree Chantecler does or Rostand. And they have the problem of moving that through a world
Mhm.
that doesn't have any of that
Mhm.
and plays a lot of games that have nothing to do with that.
Mhm.
Once you have that, your life becomes dangerous.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I think I've said enough, but the notion of truth,
Mhm.
what that means to speak truth to these silly characters that have a kind of power through their position in society.
I think one question that's probably coming up in a lot of people's minds that I do think has to be answered is, but is it the truth? So his belief is that he makes the sun rise, and we have a perspective that he doesn't actually do that. So it's even adds a layer of complication to it. Now, my ultimate conviction.
It's more than that, though, Lisa. It's
Yeah.
more than just the sun rising. That's the least part of it.
Yeah.
And he will get past that and return to the larger message, doing your work,
Mhm.
respecting the world, be all encompassing, not rejecting. That's the beauty of Chantecler.
I agree. I agree completely. But it's just an interesting wrinkle on this question that and I've mentioned that it's what puts a lot of people off from this play is that he just ultimately this vision seems diluted. And I don't think it is in any way when all is said and done, but we should probably hold that for after.
Maybe we should wait till the next act to discuss that. But to me, his belief that he does it, that's what's significant, whether he does or not. It's less significant in a way. And it will all become much clearer in the next act, because this is Rostand himself as well.
Mhm.
And the aim is to bring light. Rostand's aim and Chantecler's aim are exactly the same, to bring light to a dark world, really, to shed light, to bring enlightenment, in fact.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's true. But I think in the next act, perhaps we can discuss whether it matters whether he makes the sunrise or not.
Mhm.
Yeah, that will come up much more clearly next act.
Heather asks, what is raising the sun metaphorically as a romantic poet? Is he shedding light on the potential of the human soul, creating those possibilities? That too, I think I want, that's to me the whole heart of the play. And I want to answer my perspective on that, but I think it'll be better to do it next time. Let's see if I can raise a question to consider in trying to think about that. What I would encourage people to think about is a romantic poet is creating an ideal world. And they're doing that with the purpose of showing the ideal within the real, right?
Yeah.
So one question you can ask yourself is, well, does that ideal exist or not? Is is the ideal real? And I think how we think about that, which will be even better informed, I think, by the next act. I think how we think about is the ideal that a romantic poet creates real will relate very closely to, does he actually make the sun rise? That might betray my answer, but Raj.
Again, like you said, we'll wait to answer that question in the next act. But like, there's one very powerful line in this act, which tells us about his motivation, Chantecler's motivation. He says, we discussed the part about like analyzing like the secret of his cry, and it just bogs him down. But like the second part of that phrase, so he says, I cannot sing anymore. I whose method was not to know how, but be quite certain why.
Why?
It's
Yes,
the
exactly.
why that matters. Like, what is the end that he's trying to achieve? And this reminds me also of, like, I don't have those lines in front of me, but when he and the pheasant hen, and he's crowing and the sun is rising, and it's like a very powerful passages, and she says, you sing beautifully. He says, no, don't tell me that I sing beautifully. Tell me that I make the sun rise. So he's focused on the end. He's focused on the end goal. Like, otherwise, what is the point of being beautiful if you're not really achieving your end?
Thank you for highlighting both of those lines. Those are perfect. That's beautiful. Yeah, that Tora Beckman, it says in the comments that he wrote something on idealism and the mind-body dichotomy, and I think he and I have a very different perspective on this. So that's part of the reason I felt motivated to talk about it. But that he's brilliant, and I'm sure that there's a lot that's helpful in that essay. I haven't looked at it recently, but I have in the past. And let's see, what else do I want to make sure I cover before we close?
We haven't mentioned the sparrowhawk.
Yes. Okay, so that was the betrayal of the crowd. Then the sparrowhawk comes over, and they all quickly return to the protective wings of Chantecler. Metaphorically, how do you interpret that sign? I've got my lens flare thing going on here.
What, the sparrowhawk? Well, he now, because he realizes that everyone looks to him for protection, and what really gives him power now, and now he has got the energy to go ahead and really fight, is because he saw the enemy of everybody in the sky, and he says, I saw what the night can do. The bird circles around 3 times, and he says, I saw the night 3 times in the shadow of a bird. So the bird reminds him that he is fighting. He's not just making the sunrise. He's got to fight the night and protect the farmyard. I mean, is that how you would see it, Lisa?
That makes a lot of sense. I think what I was wondering is the reaction of the crowd. And I mean, it makes sense in the context of the farmyard why they come to him for protection. But what is it, just showing the fickleness of crowds? Is that all? I mean, just abstractly how fickle they are? Or is there a sense in which there are times when the crowd, it's funny, I don't know, I have no idea if this is.
I'm not sure we should try and make this metaphorical. I think in the act as it stands,
okay,
this is a turning point.
Okay.
And Chantecler is reminded of his duty to protect the farmyard animals and their vulnerability. So yes, he is superior to them. He knows he's superior to them, but he has to protect them. And
so so it is, we needed that moment to have him become awakened to the reality of their
he gets new courage from the realization leaving aside whether he makes the sunrise or not, he is the protector of all the farmyard creatures, and they look to him for protection. And this is his job. And he has to bring light to them, and he has to fight the birds of prey and anything else that menaces them. That is his duty. And that's what gives him the energy to fight back. He's not just fighting back for himself now. He's fighting back because of his duty, his belief in his duty. He knows he has a role to perform and he must carry it on. And he's now got new strength to fight because he must fight the dark. He has to fight the dark and the creatures of the dark. And suddenly he can fight back.
Yes.
It's not a question of him personally, it's what he's supposed to do.
So
that's how I see it anyway.
Yeah, that's I see that's the power of that dramatic moment. I'm going to acknowledge in advance that this might be a little bit of a stretch to see something metaphorically in the crowd, but I just want to throw it out there because this is what popped into my head. There's a scene in Hugo's 93 when they're lost at sea and facing death. And one of the characters says to the other, can you take her in the other room, please? You have to take her out. Oh, you can take her. Sorry. There's a scene where one of the characters says to the other, do you believe in God? And he says, yes, no, sometimes. And in times like this. So it's in times of danger.
Yes.
That's when we turn to our ideals for protection. And it does, I just wondered if maybe there's a little bit of that we do, in there's the playing the game of artistic pretentiousness. And then there's what we really need for our souls and for our like sense of purpose and inspiration. And so he might have felt a little bit like, oh, when people feel the real need for actual inspiration, they come back to me. But otherwise they're playing all these pretentious games in their literary salons.
Yes. I don't know. I'm just looking at the text and there's so much that could be read into this.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's always a hazard. Jana?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on this Chantecler feeling a duty to protect, and of course he wants to protect. But there's this one line in scene 6 where the pheasant hen says again to Chantecler, well, no, I mean, she's been urging him to go. And she says, you will stay here. And Chantecler says, not for their sakes, but the sake of my song. It might spring forth less clear from any other soil. But now, to inform today that it is sure to be called tomorrow, I will sing. So it is about the song and what he is. This is his identity. This is what he does. And it's not as much as I stay here because I need to protect these others or whom have betrayed me anyway. So that was just
absolutely right. Yes, absolutely. I agree with you. I have missed that bit a bit. Yes.
Yeah, that is that theme of fulfilling your vocation, being true to what it is that you're meant to contribute to the world, being as clear about that as you can, and then just having that be the overarching purpose and goal. Let's see, any other, well, we have to talk about the pheasant hen luring him away. Now she is in love. I mean, there was that first scene when she fell in love with him watching his cry, that here, after his courageous defense of himself, she says, come with me to the woods, I love you. And that makes him vulnerable to being taken away from his home because she does love and appreciate him. Come to the woods where everything is fresh and innocent and we can love each other. It feels like her motivation and what would be appealing to him about that are both positive, noble impulses, but he feels like he would be betraying his home. Is that,
Yes, absolutely. I mean, she tries to get him several times, as Jana has said, and he just feels he has to carry on his duties. Yes, looking after the farmyard and making the sun rise. These are the important things for him. And the only thing that lets him go is that he can't seem to crow. And that is crucial. I mean,
it's when they have enough influence to undermine his song and he can't do it anymore. That's he's
forgotten how to be normal and natural, and it won't come because he's thinking too hard. Just like the golfer thinking, now how shall I hit it, and should I lift my stick high up or low down? And the instinct has gone with he's after all, he's just been in a deathly combat. It's not really surprising he's finding it difficult. But it is the interview that really upset him. Yes.
Do you see significance in the white pile ultimately killing himself? That it was his own blade that slashed. I mean, Chantecler still won the fight in the sense of deftly moving out of the way, but I didn't know if there's significance in that moment.
I think it was an inevitable dramatic thing for the drama. We needed it. And in any case,
one thing that just occurred to me though is that Chantecler didn't have to kill him. He doesn't kill.
Yes, that's it. Of course, he didn't. He kills himself. Wonderful.
He kills himself. Yeah. So Chantecler wins the fight, but the opponent kills himself. Yes. Couldn't end any other way.
Yes. And his first thought after being safe is that now the sun will rise again tomorrow over our valley. Yes.
One thing, there was a thread that I wanted to pick up again, because at one point we talked about Patou and his role with Chantecler, and I just love him throughout this act, of course. And the comparison was made to Lebray, which I completely see, but there was something in me that said, yes, but they're different. They're so different. And the difference I realized here is that in Cyrano, Lebray is the practical minded one. He sees Cyrano, the idealist, undermining his opportunity for practical success by being so committed to his ideal. So he's continually saying to him, but just take him as a patron, because you'll finally be able to produce your play, and always trying to urge him to, and Cyrano always refuses. But here, Patou is a dreamer. He's an idealist, just like Chantecler. He just has a keener eye on reality, but he's not asking Chantecler to compromise in any way or to be practical.
No, he's got a slightly less close role, hasn't he? As a friend, I mean. He is more detached. But in fact, it is Patou's threat. He's speaking to the Pile Blanc, if you get your knives out, I will strangle you. So he is prepared to do something practical to save Chantecler.
Yeah.
And that's more or less when Pile Blanc loses it.
I guess that's the distinction I see, is that he is there as the guardian trying to protect him in his expression of the ideal. Whereas Lebray, I don't consider this a fault in Lebray. He's just made of different stuff from Cyrano. His role is always the friend who wants to see his friend succeed, and therefore urges him to give up the fight a little bit, not be so principled that he can't have success in reality.
Yes, and Patou also has a role in the farmyard. He is a protector, and he is the idealist in the farmyard. So, it's a different role from Lebret, but it's a really interesting point there. I hadn't thought of that. That's really interesting. Yeah.
Let's see. I had a quote here. I forget. I have a page of research, and this is from an article. I'm not sure exactly the source. I'll have to go back and look it up again. But I just liked this as a summation of what we've seen so far. And this actually connects well, I think, with what John was trying to express. Chantecler is the tale of the eternal struggle of the artist, possessed with a sense of the sacred necessity of his mission to adjust himself to a society that fails to understand him and to accept him at his own self-valuation. I thought that was a good.
And it's very, very apposite. Yes, of Rostand and here at Chantecler.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yes, very much.
Well, we're just about out of time. I think I'll end with a mention of how the act ends, because after all that life and death drama, we keep the humorous spirit with the entrance of the turtle. I just laughed out loud at the announcement that the turtle has now arrived.
That's very good. There's a lot of humor.
There is.
That's lovely. Thank you. It's a wonderful.
Thank you, everybody. This was such a fascinating discussion. It makes me appreciate and love and understand the play all the more. So we will have a discussion of Act 4 next week.
Thank you.